Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. I do have one quick favor before we get to the video that you came here for, and that is very simply this. You see that little red subscribe button below this video? Go ahead, smash that subscribe button. It really does help me. It really does help this channel grow and my audience grow. So go ahead and hit that red subscribe button. And now, here is the video that you came here for. But with that said, let's get to the topic of the day. And boy, oh boy, is this one a doozy. Remember about, 5, 6, 7 weeks ago as the college football regular season came to a close, and I told you guys and girls, I said, look, for the first time ever, the college football transfer portal, this is going to be a mega topic here over the coming weeks on the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. It happened last spring in college basketball when for the first time we had the one-time transfer rule, and we saw insanity in the portal until May, June, July. Remember? July, Marcus Carr hits the portal, Kofi Coburn hits the portal, Jaden Shackelford hits the portal in college basketball. Well, now, for the first time, we had the one-time transfer rule in college football, and I said it is going to be bananas, and not to my credit, because we could all see it coming, but it has been. Quinn Ewers, number one quarterback in the class of 2022, reclassified into 2021. He hits the portal, ends up at Texas. Keaton Slovis, former starter at USC. Some thought he was a first-round NFL quarterback at some point. Hits the portal. He's now going to Pitt. On and on and on and on and on. But with that said, there is no bigger name. There is no more important name to have hit the portal so far than what happened on Monday afternoon when Caleb Williams, who was the number one high school quarterback in the class of 2021 until Quinn Ewers reclassified, when Caleb Williams decided to hit the transfer portal. That is right, the guy that almost saved Oklahoma's season, that almost elevated them into the college football playoff, and a guy that is as coveted of a high school football recruit as we have seen in recent years. That dude entered the portal on Monday. Now, it's worth noting that he did say kind of in his post on Instagram, social media, that he will consider a return to Oklahoma, but at the very least, he is in the portal. And as I said, I believe he is about the most marquee player that could possibly enter the portal. And barring something shocking from Bryce Young or C.J. Stroud, which we know those two guys aren't going anywhere, he is the biggest name that will enter the portal this offseason. And the reason why is simple. There were other guys that were really good who entered the portal. There were other guys with really good pedigrees, including Quinn Ewers, one of the most highly rated quarterbacks in the history of the 24/7 recruiting database. But there's nobody that has the pedigree of Caleb Williams that did what he did this season. We all saw him take the field against Texas, take the job from Spencer Rattler, and never give it back. We all saw that game against the Longhorns where he stepped onto the field, led them to victory, finishing the game with 212 yards passing against the Texas Longhorns. I almost said Texas Tech Longhorns. That would have been really dumb to say. Finishes with 212 passing yards against Texas. Rallies his team to victory. That throw off one leg hitting Marvin Mims to take the lead. It was one of the signature plays, signature games of the entire college football season. And to his credit, he didn't really slow down from there. Week later against TCU, 18 of 23 passing, 4 touchdowns, 295 yards. 2 weeks after that, 402 yards, 6 touchdowns, 0 interceptions against Texas Tech. And it was at that point there was real talk that Caleb Williams was going to be a Heisman Trophy candidate. Now, admittedly, a few weeks later, he goes to Baylor. He gets banged up. Oklahoma loses. They lose in the the Bedlam game to Oklahoma State. And from there, we know what happens. Lincoln Riley leaves. But to Caleb Williams' credit, he even came back for the bowl game and balled out against Oregon last week, 21 of 27 passing, 242 yards, and 3 touchdowns. And so to me, he is the most high-profile player that has entered the portal. And I'll just say very quickly, I think this was the right move for Caleb Williams. I feel bad for Oklahoma fans. I wish he stayed and it was Boomer Sooner forever. But I believe in the one-time transfer world, I believe he handled this situation about as well as he could, stuck with his teammates through the true end of the season, through the bowl game, and now it's time to evaluate what is best for him. It is time to see what his options are out there because you only get one chance at this thing, and if you stay at Oklahoma and it doesn't work out, you could be putting your whole career at risk. Not saying that's what's going to happen. But he owes it to himself. The rules allow him to see what are his best options out there, and I believe he owes it to himself to at least look at those options. And as I said a minute ago, sometimes in college hoops last year, we saw guys enter the portal, see what was out there. Kofi Cockburn at Kentucky or at Illinois takes a look, realizes there are not a lot of good options out there. I think for a time he thought he was going to Kentucky, but I bring it up because Kofi Cockburn, he wanted to see what was out there, decided it was best for him to return to Illinois, where he's having an all Big Ten, All-American type season. Same with Jaden Shackelford at Alabama, and I believe Caleb Williams owes it to himself to see what is out there. So with that said, I mean, let's get to the fun part, which is where could Caleb Williams potentially end up next season in college football? First of all, his dad did say in a statement to Yahoo's Pete Thamel, basically, look, we are going to the place that is going to put us in the best position to prepare us for the NFL and for the pros. And basically his dad said, look, you go to college to learn your craft, what you're going to do as a professional, and that's what Caleb's craft is. It's playing quarterback, and we want to go to the place that's going to prepare him best. The great part, if you're Caleb Williams, that's something that every quarterback says when they hit the portal. The difference with Caleb Williams and all the other ones is Caleb Williams can literally go anywhere he wants. I don't think there's a single program in college football that is not that. Let me put it to you this way. I think there are certain schools that will not call, and we'll get to a few of them in a minute, but I don't think there's a single school in America that if Caleb Williams said, I want to go here, that school would say no to. But I do think the two places that probably on the surface would be the best spot for Caleb Williams, because they're the best spot for any quarterback, probably aren't realistic, right? I don't think he's going to Alabama. They got a guy named Bryce Young coming back for 1 year. I don't think he's going to Ohio State. They obviously had a ton of success with a transfer a few years ago by the name of Justin Fields. You may remember him. But they have C.J. Stroud, and I don't think Caleb Williams is going to any place where there is a clearly established quarterback already in place, and I just don't think that's going to happen, right? And so with that said, those are probably the two spots that every recruit in America will want to go to if they could. But I do think there are some logical landing spots for Caleb Williams if he does decide to pursue a transfer. And as I get into them, what I would also tell you is this. I'm going to give you the first one, and you guys are going to laugh. But the first one that I actually think is realistic, and don't laugh, is the University of Georgia. And I don't want to reveal who texted me this, but I will give credit. I have a good contact, a good source, if you will, in kind of that quarterback space, that world that the quarterbacks live in, that texted me, in the middle of the afternoon, probably about 2 or 3 hours before Caleb Williams officially hit the portal. And he told me, hey, just a heads up. I'm hearing Caleb Williams is at least looking around, is at least thinking about what possibilities may be out there. And the first school that he mentioned was Georgia. And I said to him, Georgia, that's career suicide for a quarterback. Did you see what he did to Did you see what Kirby Smart did to Justin Fields? Did you see what happened to JT Daniels this year? But I think the argument for Georgia, and I'm not saying that's where Caleb Williams is going to end up. I'm just telling you, I think the argument for Georgia is pretty straightforward. It's pretty simple, right? Every other piece is in position to win a national championship. They're going to have an elite defense no matter who they lose to the NFL. They're going to have an elite running game no matter who they lose to the NFL. They're going to have an elite offensive line no matter who they lose to the NFL. They're going to have elite skill position players no matter who they lose to the NFL. And so Caleb Williams can step in and make them literally maybe the second most dynamic team across the board in college football behind Alabama. I'm not going to put them ahead of Alabama because Alabama's going to have a guy named Bryce Young. But you look across the board, defense, run game, skill position. They need that quarterback. And Stetson Bennett, this is his final year of eligibility. And JT Daniels, it's pretty clear that we don't really know if JT Daniels is the guy, because if he was definitively the guy, he would have beat out and kept the job from Stetson Bennett, and when he got back from whatever injuries he's been dealing with, would have regained the job. And so I think Georgia is a realistic option. I think the next one is probably the most obvious one, if Caleb Williams does decide to leave Oklahoma, and I think it's USC. And I think it's USC for one simple reason. There's a guy named Lincoln Riley there, a guy named Lincoln Riley that he committed to when Caleb Williams committed to Oklahoma, a guy named Lincoln Riley who currently has coached the starting quarterback of the Cleveland Browns for at least right now, the starting quarterback of the Arizona Cardinals, Kyler Murray. Both those guys won Heisman trophies, Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, the starting quarterback of the Philadelphia Eagles in Jalen Hurts, who is about to make the playoffs this year. And on top of that, Caleb Williams obviously has a relationship with Lincoln Riley. And what I would say is, I just mentioned it a minute ago, Kedon Slovis has left USC for Pitt. And there is an opening at USC. Now, it's also worth noting they had a very good freshman in their own right this year named Jackson Dart. I think that Lincoln Riley would be perfectly comfortable going into next season with Jackson Dart as his quarterback. But at the same time, it is worth noting, like I said a minute ago, If Caleb Williams wants to come to your school, you're not turning him down no matter who you have on your roster, unless maybe you're Nick Saban with Bryce Young. And so I bring it up because Jackson Dart, I think, is talented, but he's not a surefire thing. And obviously, Caleb Williams, I think if he comes to USC knowing that Lincoln Riley playbook, I would think that he would have the inside track to getting that starting job. Now, on the flip side, what I would say about Caleb Williams and Lincoln Riley is this, is the idea that if it was a no doubt about it, I'm going to play for Lincoln Riley, why didn't he just hit the portal 2-3 weeks ago when Spencer Rattler hit the portal, when Quinn Ewers hit the portal, and go play for Lincoln Riley? Maybe he loves Oklahoma. Maybe he wanted to be respectful of his teammates. But if it was such a done deal to Lincoln Riley, I don't know why he would not have potentially just gone ahead and transferred immediately after the season. So that's worth noting. Maybe the possibility exists that relationship isn't as close as we thought it was. And let's be honest, it's not as though Lincoln Riley didn't burn any bridges on his way out of Oklahoma. Very surprising decision. Goes to the podium the night of the Bedlam game. Says, I am not leaving for LSU. Only 12 hours later to leave for USC. A couple other schools that I think are probably worth noting in terms of the Caleb Williams pursuit. One, listen, I think anytime a big-time quarterback hits the portal, Ole Miss has to be a call that you take if you're that quarterback. Caleb Williams wants to be trained for the NFL, as he should be, as any quarterback should be. And you can argue there's nobody better in college football at developing quarterbacks than Lincoln Riley, and that's than Lane Kiffin. And that's no disrespect to Lincoln Riley. That's no disrespect to Ryan Day. That's no disrespect to Steve Sarkisian. But Lane Kiffin won 4 SEC championships with 4 different starting quarterbacks at Alabama. That's pretty darn good. He took Matt Corral from Matt Corral was kind of the backup to John Rice Plumlee when Matt Luke was the head coach at Ole Miss. 2 years later, Matt Corral's going to be a first-round pick. And so if you're Caleb Williams, I think you got to sit there and say there might not be a better coach in the country to develop quarterbacks than Lane Kiffin. Now, it's worth noting, and I think this is an important part, is Ole Miss a place that you can go and compete at the highest levels? And I think that's an important element of this for Caleb Williams, is it's no disrespect to Ole Miss at all. But do you want to go to a place where you're going to be, third, fourth, probably in the preseason, even with Caleb Williams in that division? Do you want to go to a place where you're going to always be in the shadow of Alabama, of Texas A&M, of LSU? Now, maybe the argument from Lane Kiffin is you come here, we won't be in the shadow. You could be the guy that takes us out of the shadows and into that national spotlight, takes us a step above that 10-2 season that we had. But I do think it's a big risk for Caleb Williams, so that one will be interesting to see. I'm trying to kind of scratch my head at some other schools that kind of make sense. And I'll talk about, and I talked about the fact that, again, my buddy that works in kind of that lives in that kind of quarterback world. He mentioned Michigan as a possibility. That's one I don't really see. They have Cade McNamara coming back. J.J. McCarthy, who obviously was Cade McNamara's backup in that bowl game the other night, college football playoff game. J.J. McCarthy was highly coveted. J.J. McCarthy played well in a backup spot. But I also think, while Michigan doesn't make a ton of sense, first of all, I'd be shocked if both those quarterbacks are back next year. There's a lot of talk about J.J. McCarthy potentially leaving, knowing that Cade McNamara is coming back. But on the flip side, Michigan is kind of one of those schools, like I said a minute ago. If you know that you have a chance to land Caleb Williams, you take him no matter who's on your depth chart because he's that talented. I heard a little Oregon buzz. I think that one maybe makes a little bit of sense. But then finally, I would say I think there's one school that makes more sense than any of the other ones. And I think it's Oklahoma. And if I was a betting man, I do think that if I had to take a guess today, that Caleb Williams is back at Oklahoma next season. And the reasons why are pretty simple. I mean, first of all, he knows the school. He knows the skill position guys. He knows the campus. He knows a lot of the staff, even though obviously Brent Venables is the new head coach. And I think that does matter. I think the fact that, yes, Brent Venables is a defensive head coach, maybe that would be a mitigating factor. But it's also worth noting that Brent Venables hired Jeff Lebby as his offensive coordinator. For people who don't know, Jeff Lebby worked under Lane Kiffin this past year, was technically the offensive coordinator at Ole Miss, but of course Lane Kiffin has his fingerprints all over this offense. And so basically you're getting Lane Kiffin light coming to Oklahoma to basically coach you at Oklahoma. So it's not as though Brent Venables is coming in and he wants to be even a Kirby Smart and win every game 14-7. Brent Venables, even with his defensive mindset, was smart enough to say, I got to get an offensive mind to run the offense, and I got to get somebody that can keep all of these guys at Oklahoma because I'm not going to, I can't go into next season. Let me put it to you this way. I think Brent Venables clearly understood, although I've never talked to him about it. I don't know Brent Venables. I think it was pretty clear to him that he knew his number one priority this offseason was do whatever it took to keep Caleb Williams. And so I think to his credit, he brought in Jeff Lebby as his offensive coordinator. I also think it's worth noting, and to me, this is actually really important. I do think like Oklahoma's doing all the right stuff right now. You bring in Jeff Lebby, and I saw this. I've never seen this before, but I think it's something that is going to happen going forward, is that Oklahoma's AD actually put out a statement. Joe Castiglione put out a statement on behalf of the athletic department to Caleb Williams on Monday when he decided to transfer, basically saying, like, look, we wish Caleb nothing but the best. We hope he does whatever's best for him. But ultimately, we believe that this is the best place for him. And I'm not going to read the whole situation, but basically what Joe Castiglione said is, we believe OU provides Caleb the best opportunity to develop as a player and realize his goal for college and beyond. We respect his right to explore his options following key staffing changes. He then continues, talks about Jeff Lebby, talks about the new staff. And so when I look at this whole situation, I'll just say this. I think the recruitment is going to be fascinating. I don't claim to have any inside information at this point. And I do believe that Caleb Williams is going to do what is best for him and make the decision that is best for him. At the same time, I would also say I think there's a very compelling argument to be made that the possibility exists that the single best place that Caleb Williams could go this offseason is, in fact, to not go any place and to stay at Oklahoma. But what I will tell you is what I said a minute ago. One, I think he handled the situation about as well as he could. He stuck around. He hung out. He did what was best. He waited his turn. He waited his turn behind Spencer Rattler. Season ends. He has the opportunity to leave then, sticks through the bowl game. And I think he did what's best. It's his decision. It's his future, and he should do what is best for him. But I'll tell you this. This is the single most fascinating, I think it's the single most fascinating story that has happened this college football offseason, because Caleb Williams could change one team's fortune next offseason or next season, whether it's Oklahoma, whether it's somebody else that he transfers into. And I'll tell you this, if he goes to USC, it's game on. They could be really good right away.